Linus, welcome to Think Bigger, Think Better. How are you doing today?
Absolutely fantastic. Nice, beautiful day here in Miami.
Superb, superb. Well, the first question I want to ask you is perhaps one that's easiest to answer. But every time you've told me, I felt I've been more confused than before I asked the question. So let me ask the question anyway. In words of one syllable, tell listeners what you do for a living.
Yeah, so I run a NFT fund. NFT stands for non-fungible token. So I buy art and gaming assets and different collectibles that are digital, and I hold them for 7 to 9 years. Some of them I trade day to day frequently, and my fund looks to collect a whole bunch of different verticals, which includes digital art, gaming assets, historic digital pieces and memes, memberships, digital memberships. We invest in infrastructure to building sort of metaverses, and we buy metaverse lands and anything that comes along with that.
So you're the kind of like the Fidelity of the NFT world. Is that too strong a thing? You're a fund manager.
Yes, I'm a fund manager. Unlike most, there aren't that many. There aren't too many funds here in NFTs, and some of them have like very specific niches. So some will just invest in the top digital artists who have historicity, and we invest in essentially everything within NFTs.
Yeah, I have a friend who does that at Citibank. He runs one of their what's called a back book, which is Citicorp's trading floors investment portfolio, and he can literally buy, Afghanistan stocks, or if he likes them, or he can buy UST bills, or he can buy Argentinian convertible bonds. He can buy anything he wants in the world. And so your remit is limited to the digital world, but you can pick and choose where you think the most value is in the digital world.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so that's one thing, but I know when you've told me what you do for a living in the past, fund manager was only a partial answer. So what's the rest of the answer?
Well, we've known each other a long time, so my backstory involves playing professional poker, learning how to do game theory and solvers. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had 2 startups. I had a production company and developed a YouTube channel, and also I did a docu-series travel show, which was wild in itself. So I learned a lot of production, and then I've been involved in the creative arts world as well.
Yeah, and of course I followed your journey, and when you started getting into the NFT world, of course you were a visitor in my house in Colorado for many months, and I thought you were out of your mind, and I'm so glad. I've enjoyed your success. I won't say as much as you have, but vicariously just seeing the way your life has been transformed over the last 18 months to 2 years, and how you've become a leader in a space where there wasn't even a space 18 months ago, is remarkable and heartwarming to me.
Well, I've always operated on the fringes, and if you operate on the fringes frequently enough and take calculated risks, you will at some point end up in the middle.
And there you are. I have my hedge fund manager friend at Citibank, who's not a conservative guy. When I told him I started to dabble in NFTs and cryptocurrency, he told me I was out of my mind. He's a financial traditionalist, and he said NFTs and cryptocurrencies are basically worth nothing, and that wasn't just a description for him, that was a prediction, that it was just like the South Sea tulip bubble of the 1600s or the dot-com burst. The world will wake up and smell a coffee, and this will be a chapter that we can laugh about in a few decades of some foolish people. I don't see it that way. I know you don't see it that way. I know Let's explain, if we could dig into what would you say to somebody like that, other than they're ignorant? But what would you say to someone like that to sort of contradict his point of view in a way that would make sense?
Yeah, I would ask him I would ask him, does he use the internet? Does he look at? I would ask him, does he use the internet? I would ask him if he looks at pictures on the internet. No, I'd ask him if he uses any social media site. Does he tweet?
Yeah,
Does he use Facebook? Those are metaverses. Those
yeah,
are what crypto makes its foundations on, and they're what NFTs work on. All NFTs are is the digitizing of assets so that you can have proven ownership of them, so you can have a better economic system, so you can decentralize the assets themselves. And we've already seen like these areas have success. Open source is adopted, decentralized tech is
yeah,
being adopted. So
yeah.
I would just ask him if he uses the internet.
Yeah. Well, he's old, so he probably uses Facebook, and that's it. So let's dig into this NFT. Let's dig into the art NFT, because I know that that was one of the early use cases for art. How has that market evolved or changed over the last 18 months to 2 years that you've been an investor?
Yeah, so I'll start with to linger a little bit at like where to just pull this in from where you were just talking about. Art is the easiest, in my opinion, one of the easiest things to digitize. It's simple. The transferability is simple. Like interaction between artists and collectors is quite simple because you already have social media platforms, and so
It's
it's
direct to consumer, right? It's disintermediated.
You're right. Exactly. It's direct to consumer and it's much easier to do. So if you wanted a more like expansive, complex part of this world, which is like metaverse lands, right? That has to be built. There has to be infrastructure. There has to be collaborations or partnerships. There has to be technological advances. There has to be network effect, right? And user adoption uh,
Yeah.
for that to work. So obviously we don't see that right now. So while what you can see is the art markets moving and popping, but there's also that development being going on. You have infrastructure being developed for ticketing, for NFC chip devices, for your resume being on the blockchain, for those types of things. So back to the art, I think art is incredibly easy to scale. It's incredibly easy to have adoption because buyers have singular assets that they can just pop in for what they like. And there's still technology in order for them to display this. So they can put this up on their background screen on their phone, or they can send it in a text message to a friend. Like memes exist in culture, and memes are a huge part of what this is. And art exists in culture. So all you've done is improved on the transferability, the traceability, and then the artist royalty situation.
So I mean, I'm not an art expert. I think I took art history in college. But one of the things that might be said to be a difference between an NFT art, like an ape or a punk or something like that, is compared to something like, oh, I don't know, what's a famous picture? Da Vinci, Mona Lisa, or Sistine Chapel. The level of complexity is still modest. Is that something that's going to change in the NFT world? Are we going to see more intricate, more complex, more, I don't know if I want to use the word beautiful, that's subjective, but are we going to see more intricacy and more complexity and bigger sort of NFT installation sort of scale art in the
Yes.
digital age?
Look, I love this question. So I'm gonna break this down to you because I think
Yeah.
most people from the outside they see one category. They see Bored Apes, and
Yep.
they don't see that there's like an incredibly diverse set of niches. And at some point in the long future, collectible profile identity is going to be 100 light years away from what digital art one-of-one pieces looks like. It's already kind of there, but if you're outside the space, you don't see the difference. So I'm not going to touch on PFPs, but what I
Yeah.
do want to talk about is something. There's two things you touched on. One is that art is going to improve as technology improves 100-fold.
Yeah.
So what you see today is just I'll give you a perfect example. I just had a tweet that just went viral of what's called a chromie squiggle, which is the first ever digital generative art piece on the most prominent platform for generative art, which is called a Chromie Squiggle. And this was in a holographic display that just, the squiggle, it's like a rainbow squiggle that just goes up and down and turns around, right? But when you look at it just on the native platform, it just looks like just a squiggle, a flat squiggle on a screen. People are like, why is this thing trading for $25,000? But when you look at this holographic display, you can extrapolate. Now, I want you to picture this. One day, you own a house of 4,000 square foot. You have guests coming over, and the guests walk in your door, and where they would have seen like a lion statue, instead, there's a holographic projection of a 20-foot Chromie squiggle that's going up and down and vibrating in color, and it's a rare squiggle, and people can walk through and look at it and interact with it. And that's the future of this, that I don't think people.
No, it's going to be dynamic. It's going to be at scale. So one thing that the Mona Lisa isn't is dynamic. So this is vibrant and it's alive and it's changing and it's shifting. It'll be scale. It'll be unique. I want to come back to the uniqueness.
And transfer, it'll be incredibly easy to transfer. So I want to, right now, if I want to move the Mona Lisa from the Louvre to a Saudi Arabian prince's display, like that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, goes through free ports, you have taxes, all that. Right now, all I can do is just send this in my wallet. Someone officially owns it. I can do it in 30 seconds. They purchase it from me.
That's great.
And then one more thing to touch on that is it's going to be much easier. One of the hardest things I think with art is if you're a novice or even middle of the pack art collector, it's hard to figure out what his pricing should be. But with blockchain tech, you can look at easily in an hour at your house through the entire history of a piece or an artist's artwork and figure out what pricing should be.
If I open up my NFT account, it says it's bid at this price and it last traded at this price. That's a kind of accuracy that doesn't exist in the physical art world.
Right. There's analytical dashboards that I can look up like an artist, and I can look at all his pieces and all the wallets that own it and know if this is a good collector base. And then I can look at the trait history. So I can see if this is a collection of 1,000, that this specific trait has a premium and trades here, here, and here. And then you can make decisions much easier. So it actually makes the users and the buyers more sophisticated, which gives them confidence. So you'll see more art collectors.
So for listeners, digital art, whether they be racehorses or bored apes or something like that, they have certain traits and characteristics. And some are more valuable than others, and some combinations of traits are more valuable than others. So you can subject art to a kind of an analytical lens on it. I still buy because I think it looks nice, but you can also take that to another level. One question I want to ask you, Linus, is about uniqueness. So what makes the Mona Lisa unique is because there's only one Mona Lisa. Actually, as I'm saying that, of course, that's complete garbage, because it's been duplicated and replicated, and there are prints of the Mona Lisa all over the world. But let's say the original, there's only one of them. Some of the digital art that I've bought, there might be 5,000 versions of it or 1,000 versions of it. Isn't that a limit to how valuable it can be? I mean, if I'm a producer of digital art, I can make the value of a single piece more valuable by making very few of them. But then I can reach fewer people. But if I make 5,000 or 10,000 of them, I can reach a lot of people, but it's going to be considerably less valuable. So I guess that seems to be what they wrestle with. So tell me about uniqueness and the fact that copyability and all that. That's something that puzzles me about the digital art world.
Well, you floated a little bit on the interesting caveat. So one thing that you want to look at, you want to ask yourself, does the fact that you can make digital posters of the Mona Lisa, does that hurt the value of the Mona Lisa, or does it expand the value of the Mona Lisa?
That's a great question.
Because now you onboard more people who get to say they own a piece, or they get to love it or spend time with it, that wouldn't get to be able to pay for that. So to me, you expand the brand of whatever that is. So that's one
That's a
important
fascinating way of
point.
looking at it. That's counterintuitive, of course. Yeah.
It is. That's one important bait. And then there's another thing I'll touch on lightly called CC0 CCO, which is Creative Commons. So in NFTs right now, there's sort of this like hotly debated, or maybe not hotly debated, um, topic between brands and IP rights, where you give exclusive rights to a piece so that only they can use it, and it should be challengeable by law. And then you can like buy and trade that, no one's going to sue you. But then there's also Creative Commons like open, where someone can say, hey, anyone who owns this, anyone can make a derivative of it and sell it if they want. They don't have to pay the original owner. And that debate comes down to the question that we're talking about, is like, who should get ownership over a specific asset? Does other people being able to make money and profit out of it, does that help your brand or does it hurt it? And I think this is just a general question that we have in the real world, and it's also being debated online. It's not solved, but there's proponents on both sides, and I see success for both of them. Like if I own privately one thing and a bunch of people are going to click and save it, which is, I think, like a lot of the question that normies or regular people like don't quite understand, is like, why can't I save this? But I want to see you, like, the thing is that you can save something for 100,000, but the reason blockchain works is because I want to see you then resell. Like if I own something that I can sell for $100,000, right now,
Yeah.
if you click save that and then go try and sell it for $100,000, do you have a market? That's the question. That's literally the ultimate question. Do you have a market for that? Well, with the answer is with blockchain, now you don't. I have the market because I have proven provenance on the blockchain, and you don't, because you don't. You won't be able to find a buyer, and I will. And that's like, I think that's the
Yes.
people are stuck on.
I see that. Oh, so that's the question, is why I just can't, right click on it and say, save it to my hard drive and then try and, I got it.
But let me ask you this question. So one day, let's say that resumes are put on the blockchain. So you have your official resume that you could just airdrop to a new potential suitor at a company. Nobody's going to want to buy and trade your resume. But let's say that someone copies your resume and tries to drop it into, let's say they want to come try to work at IBM or let's Tesla, and someone says like, oh, send us your resume through the blockchain, and they copy Paul Gibbons' resume and drop it in. These people are going to be able to look on the blockchain and say, that's not your resume. You're a bullshitter. You're a liar.
Oh, I see. Yes, indeed.
Right. So this brings up its own problems, like privacy and whether people are going to want these things.
Sure. But there's a verification of physical identity and digital identity that's not possible without. That's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Right. I think people see NFTs and they say like, oh, it's just pictures of Bored Apes and digital art. It's just that the other things that we're talking about right here just haven't been fully developed yet because they take time to build the infrastructure.
All right, let me ask you a really personal question, and you can decline to answer it. First part of the question is, what's the highest priced sale that you're aware of digital art in the world to date?
I think Beeple's of digital art.
Beeple.
Beeple had a single piece sell for 69 million. I know that there's been
that's real money.
Yeah, no, that's real money. There's been buckets of assets, so multiple assets.
Oh, right. Like a portfolio. Like Paul Allen from Microsoft is selling his art collection, which I think it's worth $1 trillion. Did you hear that? It's going to Sotheby's or Christie's. Paul Allen, one of the Microsoft's founders, I think he was the 26th richest person in the world right now.
$1 billion art collection.
He's passed away. It's $1 trillion with a capital T dollar art collection is going to go on the block sometime later this year. So it's interesting.
So interestingly enough, last year in August, there was this massive run in what's called Art Blocks, which is the premier, I mentioned earlier, premier generative art. I think that this is going to be the biggest thing. Art, the Baroque or the Renaissance of art will be generative art. But some secret collector came in and spent, I don't remember, it was like $25 million on pieces, and just hasn't touched their collection since. And we found out it was one of the greatest traditional art collectors in the world. I can't
Oh, wow.
remember. I can't pull the name off the top of my head, but they placed a
Sure.
massive
Well,
bet on
somebody
it.
who knows what's what in the art world spent $25 million on NFTs.
Yes, they bought a piece for 6.5 million, like
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So
And what's the most valuable single piece in your portfolio? This you may not wish to say, but say if you wish.
well, would you like to talk about the fund, like the
In the fund, in the funds. Let's say in the funds. Answer it any way you're comfortable.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Because how do you define like, are we talking about like value, like pure value today, or are we talking about like what I think the future value will be of a piece?
No. Pure value. I don't know. You can talk about pure value or peak value or something like that. I mean, one of the great things about digital art is there's a market, right? You can look up online. It's like, where's the last transaction and what's the current bid? So
Yeah.
answer
So
that.
I own I'll mention two really incredible pieces. So I own what's called the Fidenza. I think Fidenza is considered the is one of two the generative art collections that will essentially be like you look 100 years from now, you're going to be looking at this collection. There's like, I can pull 5 things out loud and tell you like these are the specific niches with NFTs you're going to look back. Like X copy would be the Da Vinci, and Fidenza would be like this, like the Basquiat works or something like that. So I own a Fidenza. It's quite a unique Fidenza. It has a very unique story behind it to tell, which adds layer like narrative into an art piece.
Yeah.
Always adds tons of value. It's considered the second rarest based on pure rarity alone, although that doesn't make it the most desirable.
Wow, these are beautiful. I'm scrolling as you're talking. These are lovely.
Yeah, this is what we call like long form generative art. It's where like the perfect collection would be like a Fidenza, because when you look at a generative art collection, you don't look at a single piece. You look at all the pieces together, and the algorithm that created that piece is the art. And so a great long form generative art is where you look at the whole thing and there's uniqueness to the entire collection, but yet there's a cohesion to the algorithm. And then, and in the best collections of all, you can click any piece and it has its own unique look. And then
So
like
some of these are 1,000. Some of these are 2,500 each.
some of them have sold for very absurd prices. Yes.
How much is 2,500 each today? It's about $5 million.
The cheapest one currently on the market is $123,000.
And then up to 5 million or so, right? If I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, there's been let's look at there's been some over the market.
How much is 2,500 each? That's $5 million, isn't it? Give or take.
There's been some over the market sales that weren't directly on the blockchain.
Right.
Like there was a $3.3 million sale on the blockchain. I'm sure there were some other ones that were off, that were traded. So yeah, it's an incredibly beautiful collection.
Yeah, it's very, very cool.
There was a point that I was getting to.
What's the most that an ape ever sold for? What's the biggest ape sale, bored ape sale?
Oh, I did want to mention one other piece that I have. So we have
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
we have an artist called Drifter Shoots. He was in army. He was a PTSD from the he had PTSD from the army. To solve his problems, he started climbing in Cincinnati, and he got wrongfully arrested, and like went through our prison system. Like it's crazy what happened by an officer that was just trying to treat him miserably. He came out of that. He started taking photos after he got out of prison from being wrongfully convicted, started climbing. And so he has this collection called Where Did My Vans Go? It's him on top. He climbs with no harness, no anything, into some of the most highest buildings in the entire country.
I'm looking at them now. I mean, these are making me dizzy looking
Right.
at these.
He does no harness, no nothing, and just takes photo at the top. Imagine being like 122 stories up in New York City, on the edge of a skyscraper, like on the corner thing of a skyscraper, and just taking a photo of your feet hanging down. So we have a really top end one in the collection that is just incredible. His brother, I just want to say condolences. His brother got shot yesterday.
Oh dear.
Right. So he comes from a hard place. So
right.
So yeah, so
so he's got a cool backstory. I mean, I think, like with all of these things, the artist's backstory is part of what creates the value. So he's a military guy who was treated very roughly post his service, and then found himself, he was, I guess, a climber, and found him and a photographer, and found a way to blend those together and start making digital art. I mean, that's a pretty damn cool story, bro. I mean,
Right.
that's a Cinderella story right there.
Photography's been a vertical that we've been investing in heavily. I think that it converts incredibly quickly and easily into NFTs, the same way that art does, and it's given those creators, those photographers, a great chance for them to now sell their art for one of the first times. So I want to be collecting. I'm also collecting AI art. So you've seen the rise of DALL-E, right? So
Yeah.
Someday, off in the future, you're going to have, I think, art that's kind of indistinguishable from created by AI, indistinguishable that's created from humans. And the same way that generative art, as I described to you earlier, is the algorithm, I think AI art will be the words that you input and how smooth you are at like linguistics for whatever that looks like. And so I'm about to be placing a bet on early AI art because when you look back, I think people will really buy into like the first AI art. It'll look crude and crass and rudimentary, but that's what it'll give it beauty because it was the first.
Well, I mean, if I may contradict you, I mean, maybe, but I mean, there was an article in the New York Times 3 or 4 months ago, or 5 months, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, that had prose that was composed by an AI in response to a question or prompt, and I can't remember what the question would be, but some kind of semi-abstract existential question, something that you'd get like on a senior year history or English test in college. And the AI is able to generate credible, legible, intelligible, structured, creative answers to these quite difficult questions in a way that would certainly pass the training test. I mean, you could not tell from the start. I mean, right now, when you listen to a computerized voice, you can tell it's Alexa. You can tell the difference between Alexa and a real human being, right? You can't tell the difference between prose that an AI creates and prose that's been created by a professional writer.
That is
fascinating. That was a huge article in the New York Times. Yeah.
And you just made me think of this. Like, imagine that an artist, this is where we have in the digital world, by the way. So imagine that an artist can create AI prose, and the purpose of the prose is so that another AI interprets the prose and creates an art piece.
Get out of here.
So the input is the linguistic, the input is to whatever it takes for the AI to create linguistics that then another AI. So it's like you start getting to levels to this stuff, and you start realizing what potential new innovations in art can come out.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking your side and not the side of my friend who's the portfolio manager, hedge fund trader for Citibank in this. I think it's really exciting. We haven't touched on decentralized finance. That's a whole other topic, and maybe another podcast entirely. That's something that I think you and I, when we've talked about this or shared this, like the disintermediation of finance, the making finance peer-to-peer, and in a sense, like essentially the future is putting the banks out of business, because if we can have peer-to-peer lending where we can lend money with very much slender margins, we won't have any need for banks to intermediate our transactions and to extract the usurious fees and interest rates that they do. But let's not talk about DeFi, because that's a whole another thing. I would like to talk about the metaverse. And did you know? I don't know if you listened to this. Zuck was on Rogan for 3 hours, which is an awfully long podcast. Did you catch any of that?
I haven't listened to this. I haven't listened to the Zuck.
So Zuck is all in on the metaverse, including renaming his company. So I mean, he's no dummy, right? So he obviously sees something in it. And again, in words of one syllable, I said, explain it as though a 15-year-old can understand it. I think I should say the otherwise. I think 15-year-olds get this. I think 65-year-olds don't. So let's explain the metaverse in a way that a 65-year-old curmudgeon might be able to understand it and see the value of it. Can we do that?
Well, I'll start with this. There's a reason why Zuck is all in on the metaverse. It's because Zuck created the first popularized metaverse. Facebook is already a metaverse. It's just a 2D metaverse. A metaverse.
It's two-dimensional. And what are the two dimensions like if we were going to bust that out?
Yeah, no. So like I'll say that I phrase it two-dimensional, and I'll explain to you why. So like I phrase it in two-dimensional because in the sense of your interaction is on a flat screen. So the reason Facebook is a metaverse is because it's a place where you socially congregate to interact with other people. And you don't just do that between the people that you know, but you do this in ideological groups like Facebook groups. You do this in threads on your feed. You do this in photographs, but it's singular. It's just flat. Someone posts a photograph and then there's a thread directly under it.
I think we've talked about this. We're getting into identity, and I think that you said used to be our identities were highly correlated with physicality, where we lived, where we worked. And now, with the rise of the internet, our identities can be interests and passion and politics and art and music and all of that. We can have identities that are global identities. Is that am I leading in the right direction there when we talk about identities and the expanded identities of the metaverse?
Yeah, I'm gonna linger on that last point of the metaverse and then bring it into identity for you. So I think where television or media got this wrong is that they kind of give this vision of the metaverse as like this 3D land where you're some strange avatar with horns and you're a game character and you're going around and talking to people. I think that that's quite a long ways off, and I think that there's intermediary levels. So that's what I think is the 4D version, and that's like 20, 30, 40 years from now. Who knows? Maybe it's 10. But in between, there's an in-between development phase to get there, and all you're doing is you're just extending your Twitter, which is a 2D metaverse, your Facebook, which is a 2D metaverse, your Instagram, which is a 2D metaverse, and you're aggregating them all together into a singular space where you can connect with each other in a much easier format. So where identity comes into play here is I think digital identity will be the biggest industry in all of the entire metaverse. And the reason an identity is not just like who you are, it's what ideologies that you live in.
Sure.
And so far, we already see this. So people have different ideologies on the internet, which is different than how they treat their IRL, their real world ideology. So in your real world, your ideologies are almost geolocation based or friends and family based. But online, those are centered around, what political view you have, what type of diet that you're eating, how you
like a keto identity or a libertarian identity or a CrossFit identity or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. So very much so. So you live in a different set of communities online, and then you also share yourself differently within each of those sub communities. So how you express how you live in one, maybe let's just take this extreme. Maybe you're like a far right. You're far right. You're I don't even know what the
Proud Boys, whatever. There are plenty of examples.
You're far right, but you're far right. But then you have this. We'll call it a semi-conflicting. In real life, it might be semi-conflicting, where you might be quite liberal on your dietary, how you view your diet. Maybe you're extremely keto and you care about your body and whatever. Something that doesn't fit the majority of whatever the other sphere is. So you have these two different opposing viewpoints, and there's barely any overlap. So maybe most people who are in that dietary community don't believe the same things you do politically, and yet you live with them comfortably. You live with them comfortably online, right? So anyways, your identity is going to be tied to that. But it's also going to be tied to the things people want to say, in the future, back to Zuck's metaverse, where the 3D version, there's going to be digital wearables. So it's how you express yourself online might be different day to day. So today, the same way you do in real life. In real life, you wear different clothes every day, right? You might be down because someone in your family's died. You're wearing black to a funeral, or you wear a suit to a wedding. So maybe online today, you woke up, you're feeling invigorated and energized because you won like 3 games of Call of Duty yesterday. So you're wearing like a Warriors outfit with like a king's shawl or whatever. There's going to be like extensions to the digital identity, but the digital identity already exists, and that is in the groups that you're in. It's just going to extrapolate further into like other native ideologies, and you'll exist with those people online.
So it's interesting. Yes, when I think about someone like me, I mean, maybe I'm weirder than most, but I can have multiple identities. I can have my IBM executive identity. I can have my poker professional identity. I wear different clothes. I associate with different people. I speak in a different way when I'm speaking to my poker bros. I speak some sort of version of millennialese. I can have my identity that likes opera. I was talking to somebody about opera on Facebook. So that's an opera, that's sort of high culture identity. And then there's another identity, which is sci-fi geek. There's another identity, which is someone who likes EDM and hip hop. So I have sort of multiple identities, that are multiple different clothing, multiple different communities I move in, multiple different interests, right? Yeah, so that, and what we're saying is the metaverse facilitates that, the growth of those multiple identities. You could say it's enriching the human experience, I suppose. I would say it is.
Right. I think there's 2 things. One, if you look at like Bored Apes and the popularization of these collectibles that a lot of people don't understand, those are the first iterations of whatever some new digital identity is. And I think that a lot of people don't quite gather that yet, which is fine. But the second is, I think a lot of people are averse to this particular change, but they do have multiple personalities. They already do. They do within their different groups. I just don't think they found out that they that these Bored Apes and stuff are just a representation of whatever that personality is.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, so the 3D metaverse is, are we all going to be walking around with an Oculus Rift on at least some of the times in our life, even oldies, even boomers and, well, millennials are getting old now too. Is that part of the future, or is there going to be a more, I don't know. I mean, I've worn an Oculus for 20 minutes. It made me dizzy. Is that going to be part of our life? If some sort of technological enhancement that allows us to make the metaverse, our metaverse participation 3D? Is that on its way?
I don't pretend to be deep enough in that sector to really know. But I would say that what's been interesting to me is that AR never really caught on. I know a lot of these companies are actually looking to make a push at AR. Maybe the reason we don't have AR is because we didn't have a smooth interface for us to interact with it. So perfect example is the Apple iPhone. The invention of that gave us the computer in our pocket, but before that, you couldn't walk around with that everywhere you go. It was clunky. People didn't have them. Whatever.
That's actually interesting. If you think about a 1980s cell phone, I had one of those ones that was the size of a shoebox. Back in the 1980s, and
you're crazy.
It would have seemed ridiculous. No, but it would have seemed ridiculous to say to someone, an investment banker in the 1980s, as I was, is like, something like that's going to fit in your pocket and you'll never leave home without it. That would seem absurd. But then perhaps that's why, us walking around with an Android or an iPhone strapped to our foreheads seems absurd today. We just haven't got to the place where that is something that's practicable. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I that is what I'm saying. I'm saying like maybe the answer is a holographic contact lens. Maybe that's like the only answer is a holographic contact lens, and it hasn't been developed yet.
Or half the world wear spectacles. I mean, even if we can do it with spectacles.
People don't, right, but maybe that's the answer. But maybe that's been tested and people don't want. I don't know why, but I'm saying that there's like, I'm giving you a potential reason why it might exist. Otherwise, I think it's interesting that it hasn't, and it might not. But when it comes to like VR and the 3-dimensional world, I think we're more reliant on younger generations growing up with that technology and it being an integral part of their growth period, rather than you and I's generation, which sure I grew up with computers and used them regularly, but I didn't grow up with 3D world that I can live around and travel in. It might just
Luca uses the Oculus at least an hour a day.
Right.
He
So
stands around with his arms just gesticulating in the middle of the living room, doing all of these things that are completely, opaque to me. I have no idea what he's doing when he's in there, but he does it for an hour a day. He's comfortable with it. It's part of his life, right? It's a strange thing to behold.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something that I would love to test and be interested in and would do, but if no one else of my era and generation is doing it, then why am I doing it, right? So that's kind of like the thing. So we need scaled adoption from an entire generation, in my opinion, who
Yeah,
accept it as the baseline. And I think that like that
yeah,
takes like the 15 years from your
yeah,
kid who finally got a quality product for them to grow up
yeah.
with that.
That's right. Yeah, and there was a philosopher of science called Thomas Kuhn who wrote in the 1950s who talked about paradigm shifts in science. The two most famous ones are the Copernican revolution that had the sun be the center of the universe, and then the Einsteinian, the relativistic revolution at the beginning of the 20th century, which overturned some of the assumptions of Newtonian physics. So those are paradigm shifts. And what Thomas Kuhn said about paradigm shifts is essentially you have to wait for the old scientists to die. Which is an interesting way of looking at it. He says they'll cling on to the old paradigm until they no longer have a voice, which is either death or obscurity. So that's an interesting. It's an interesting take.
Right. I think what, and this is a whole abstract conversation, but as people get older, the things that made them successful, they root them like that got them to where they are. They root themselves in, and I think the human brain is sort of built that way because for 100,000 years, the elders were the ones who passed down knowledge, and so the youngers learned. But now technology is so rapid that and there's such there's such fast political wins or wins in society in general that like younger generations have great ideas and things that they want to do, and oftentimes now they can actually be right. Very frequently they can be right. It's much different than like a watering hole path from 80,000 years ago. Now it's like new versions of rights that we think should be applicable to humanity, and that older generations didn't grow up with that, so it didn't get them to where they are. It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I feel 25 years younger after this conversation. Actually, I feel myself very, 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 very much better informed about things than I was at the beginning of it. We're kind of running out of time. I want to keep these on the punchier side, which is hard to do. It's a pity that we didn't get into decentralized finance, but that we'll leave that for another day. What I'd really like to know is, what my listeners to know is, where can they find you in the world? How can they invest? Where can they find you? Those sorts of questions. So have at it for a minute here.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm linuscaldwell.eth. You can find me on Discord.
LinusCaldwell.eth on
.eth.
Yep.
On Twitter. You can look up Alphaverse, the Alphaverse Fund, if you want to learn more about our fund. Feel free to DM me. I'll share with you some of our portfolio and what that looks like. And you can also look up Alphaverse Capital if you want to learn more about DeFi funds or both our funds. And yeah, I'd love to share more Chan Art stuff with you. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, well, I hope you do many more podcasts and broadcasts and all this kind of stuff. Certainly an exciting area. Certainly, can't wait to see you on Rogan. Maybe you'll get on Rogan and spend 3 hours talking to Rogan about NFTs. I'm surprised that he hasn't done anything in this space yet. So thank you. So that's Alphaverse Capital and Linus_Caldwell.eth.
No, there's no underline. So it's Linus Caldwell, 2 L's at the end, .eth.
All one word. Linus Caldwell, all one word. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much for an entertaining and informative chat.